from Chennai, India, which is normally not where she's based, but that's where she's coming from today. And I'm talking about Niloofer Darbari, who is with us. Niloofer, please go ahead and turn on your camera so that we can see you. There you are, Niloofer. Great to have you with us. Oh, you came on, but you came back off. Yeah, there you go. Stay on like that. So a quick introduction on Niloofer, and then I'm gonna play a little sound here. Keep your ears open, because I'm gonna be playing a little sound after introducing Niloofer. She has more than 22 years of proven expertise designing and executing strategic initiatives for global technology conglomerates like Fiserv and Hewlett Packard, working across multiple cultures in Asia, Pacific, Europe, and Americas. She has led multiple business innovation and transformation initiatives around mergers and acquisitions, go-to-market strategies, customer engagement models, and cost optimization. In her spare time, as if she has any, she's also one of the founding members of two global G6PD deficient-related task forces focused on creating more awareness of an X chromosome-linked genetic mutation that impacts an estimated 500 million individuals globally. Now, Niloofer, it's a pleasure to have you with us, but before you start, I'm gonna play a little audio here. Listen up, audience, to this audio that I'm gonna be playing here. The screen may go dark momentarily, but we'll be back with you. My goodness, what was that? Well, Niloofer is going to be telling a little bit about what that was all about. Niloofer, you should be getting a prompt there to make you the presenter. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and expertise with our global audience today.
Sure, thank you so much, Joseph. And I keep reminding myself that I have to say the name right. I hope I got it right this time. But yeah, what was that? Any guesses, anyone? Was it noise? I actually, this time I heard it, I thought it wasn't really very noisy, but anyway. Was it chaotic? Were you uncertain and confused? I think Jose kind of gave you a little bit of a headway in terms of what was coming. So I'm guessing you weren't as confused, but generally, you know, I was wondering what this was all about, and was it synchronized or was it not synchronized? I want Jose, if you can play the next clipping that we have for the audience. Let's take a listen to the next clipping and tell me what you think about it. Jose, are you able to share the next clip, the music? Awesome. Thank you so much, Jose. So what do you all think of this? Give me a second. Let me show my screen again. So any suggestions on which one you thought was a little more effective. For this one, do you believe it was harmonized? Was it synchronized? Was it cohesive? Did you see everyone playing together as against the first session? Was it coordinated? Keep this music in mind because we'll come back to it during the presentation as well. But what I really like is a saying by David Amram, and he says, in symphonic music, when you are conducting, you are feeling the whole orchestra, thinking ahead, so you can prepare for change. And in today's session, we'll be using a lot of this to think about how are we actually preparing for change. Interestingly, this is a study done by the Bridges Consultancy Group in 2016. And in 2016, it was estimated that 67% of all well-formulated strategies failed due to poor execution. And this study was conducted across 18 different countries, 38 different organizations, and I believe around 118 leaders that CXOs that they spoke to. So I know it's 2022, but given the move with COVID and things like that, we are still struggling, and I see that over and over again in my organizations and the organizations I work with. We are really struggling with execution of a well-formulated strategy. And that's what we're going to talk about today. If you think of yourself as that principal conductor, and remember Mozart's symphony here, we are here to talk about the strategic vision framework, the 3 foundational pillars of that framework, and the big mistakes that I have to say that even I have made throughout my career and learned from in terms of how you execute a transformation, a cultural transformation or an organizational-wide transformation to help us move from one where we are to where we want to be. So I'd like to start with a little bit of a story. If you see the hut on the left-hand side, now let's think about this hut. You have mom, dad, you have 3 siblings, and you have grandma staying in the hut. And now mom and dad are extremely passionate and hardworking, and they have a vision to move to this mansion on the right. And they're really working very hard. They're saving their money. They're doing everything they can to move from where they are here to where they want to be and to a much better place in their opinion. Now, of course, the twins, the 2 little twins of the 3 siblings, they're excited. They love to go out in the forest and play every day in the woods. However, when mom and dad talk to them about the fancy house and their private rooms, they're very excited about the move and they have bought into this vision. However, the teenage daughter is very clear that she is not interested because she's in love with the neighborhood boy and she believes that, that is her world. And she has no interest in buying into this vision that mom and dad have. Now, let's talk about grandma. Now, grandma, of course, is okay on the surface and has not raised any concerns. But deep down, she is petrified about the move. And she's petrified because while today she's able to engage with the family very effectively, she's extremely scared or afraid that she would be relegated to the furthest room in the mansion and she wouldn't be able to engage with the family the way she does today. So as you can see, you and I would look on the right and say, hey, why not? This is a great vision. But when you don't have buy-in from your stakeholders, key stakeholders, even some of the most amazing visions that you might have, you still may not have buy-in and engagement from the workforce. And I'll give you a real life example from one of the projects that I worked on. We were trying to penetrate the lower, segments, market segments, and we had come up with a cost optimization initiative for one of our products. so that we could penetrate, we could get a price point that would be very effective for this market. But when we started training the workforce, the first question that we got back as a team was, am I going to lose my job? And the fear of job security, which is really real, played a much higher role because we did not do a very effective job of communicating the big vision and the big picture of where we wanted to go and why we were working on the cost optimization.
Hi, Niloofer, real quick here. The audience is not able to see your slides moving right now. We're still seeing a slide that has an orchestra only.
Oh, really? Okay. Let me unshare and share again. Then was it? Give me a second.
No, it should be just on your slide advance. We're able to see your screen. You're just not able to see the next slide. It's not going to the next slide for us.
Oh, can you see it now?
We can see you, but not on presentation mode.
Oh, yeah. Let me go back. Give me a second. I'm sorry. This is taking time.
Whatever you see on that screen is what we see. And now we see your opening slide. Yeah. And if you can fast forward to the slide that you're talking to.
Oops. I'll have to. Sorry, a few technical challenges. I didn't, like Jose said, I am based in the US and I'm actually traveling on vacation right now. And this is what I like to do during vacation. So.
Great, we can see your agenda slide now with the strategic vision framework and the house, and yeah, we're back in there.
Oh, okay, perfect. So I won't go through the whole spiel again, but this is what I was talking about, this little heart on the left and the intent to move to the mansion on the right. And what we will be working on today is, or talking about, is the strategic vision framework that plays a critical role in the transformational journey while moving from the current state to the future state. Can you see my slide now? I moved to the next.
Yeah, we can see the pyramid.
Okay, perfect. Give me a second. I'm just moving things out. So if you think of the strategic vision framework, and it's no rocket science, but I think it is critical, it's looking at how do we tie strategy and execution in the same box. And typically there are separate groups that focus on strategy. Sometimes you call in a consulting firm and you try and get all this great work done, and then they prefer to move out to other interesting things, and we are looking at how do we execute. Now in this framework, the idea and the intent is to look at the strategy and the execution in in the same setup. And we start with the strategic driver vision, which is always aligned to what the organizational vision is, because you are trying to drive forward with something that is aligned to what your corporate team or the organization wants. And then what you do is you break down that strategic vision into vision elements. Once you've identified the vision elements, then you break it down into work streams based on those vision elements. The work streams then break that down and they work independently to come up with their individual goals. And then based on the work streams' individual goals, they would then drill down to high-level deliverables. And then this entire strategy is driven by an integrated plan of record. Give me a second, I'm moving forward. So, that's great on paper, but let's talk about a real life, or, it is a hypothetical example, but let's put it into the, let's look at it from an example's perspective. So if you think of the strategic driver for this example, we want to become a fully integrated payments provider of choice globally. And how this ties into our org vision is our organizational vision is to move, the aspiration is to move money and information in the world, that way that moves the world. So having a fully integrated payments provider of choice definitely fits in and aligns really well with the organizational vision. But then now let's start breaking it down into vision elements. We're talking about global, right? Being a global payments provider of choice. Well, the second vision element would be the payments provider of choice. So we want to become a payments provider of choice. And the third one would be we want to be fully integrated. So these are the three vision elements. Now, based on these elements, you start thinking of, okay, if we want to be global, what are the different geographies that we would want to operate in? And then the work streams start, we start defining the work streams based on which countries we want or regions we want to engage in. When you think of the payments provider of choice, the question is what payments products do we want to be in? And the payments products we would want to be in should be relevant to the geographies that we want to be in. The third question would be what do we integrate with? So we want to be fully integrated, but who are we going to integrate this product with? Again, the question would be relevant. In Fiserv, it's very relevant because we have such a huge portfolio of products, but would be relevant to the payments products that you've selected, to the geographies that they will be engaged in, because you might have different providers in different geographies that you want to engage with. Now, imagine in an organization when folks work in silos and you have the product team driving a certain topics forward, you have delivery working on certain topics, you have the sales folks engaging and looking at different topics. The intent of the whole strategic framework is to bring it all together and to look at it as a consolidated and integrated plan of record that is managing the entire execution towards that strategic vision end to end. And when you do this, you're also engaging the workforce really early. You're engaging the right stakeholders. Again, think of Mozart's symphony and the different SMEs that were playing instruments in that symphony. You're bringing in your best talent and you're bringing in a common thought process and you're collaborating across multiple stakeholders to ensure you have a really consolidated plan, an effective plan, and then you do multiple check-ins on a regular basis to make sure that you are, moving ahead based on the plan. And of course, changing as well as the environment changes. What I usually like to do is to talk about when we think of a strategic initiative, I like to start building it upwards to look at how does this then tie into the business unit vision or the service line vision, depending on how big and broad your organization is. How does it tie into the business unit vision, and then how does it tie into the organizational vision? I'm running a little, I know my technical challenges got us a little late, so I'll try and move a little quick. So in terms of the three foundational pillars of this strategic governance and framework, in my mind, there are three main pillars that we need to look at and the role that we play as from a governance or a leader, as a part of the principal conductor, playing the role of the principal conductor. One is to maintain focus and drive everyone towards that common vision. The second one is the governance model. How are we set up to execute on this change and on this transformation? And then the third one, and a very big pillar, is culture and communication. And if you've heard about the 3 C's of communication, it's basically communicate, communicate, communicate. And I cannot stress how important communication is when you're looking at driving these large transformation initiatives. So in terms of maintaining focus, one example is we were looking at reducing the cost of implementations, again trying to penetrate a lower, smaller, a different market segment with a lower price range. And we were focused on reducing our cost of implementations for that product by half. And we initially worked with the sponsor to baseline where we were today. And then we actually worked with our sponsor to ensure that we have a very clear vision of what we want and where we want to land in terms of the focus of the initiative. So once we were able to arrive at a cost reduction by 50%, we then engaged the larger workforce, but the singular focus in terms of the vision, not in terms of the work streams, because we had a lot of different things going on to make this real. but everyone was aligned to a common vision, which is to bring down the cost of implementations by half. Talking about the governance model, now different governance models make sense for different initiatives. So there is no one size fits all when it comes to a governance model. And I'll give you 3 examples here. So one is when we were moving from a publicly listed entity to a merged back office subsidiary. In that case, in terms of the governance structure, we had a 2-in-the-box model where we had equal representation from the merged back office subsidiary as well as the publicly listed entity. And then we were merging and we were merging into a larger global conglomerate. So from that perspective, we also had someone from the corporate office who was part of this structure, the 3-in-the-box structure for each work stream. And I believe we had 7 or 8 work streams at that point in time that was there to help support the teams, help with corporate guidance, and also help with escalations. Now, if you think of the second model, we were looking at moving from a localized delivery model to a global delivery model. And this was a worldwide initiative that touched all the 3 regions, main regions that we had. That was Americas, Asia Pacific, and EMEA, that is Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And this was a huge global initiative that was driven by the corporate team. However, in that, we had multiple work streams that were functionally aligned based on the topics that we were addressing in the global delivery model. But we also had regional representatives that were looking at the localization of that corporate strategy, which would make sense for their regions. So we had a work stream specific view with work streams in different regions rolling up to the corporate office, but we also had a regional leader in each of the regions to make sure that the execution was tailored to the specific region that they were addressing. And then the third model in terms of governance was when we were looking at driving innovation through the centers of excellence. Now, in this case, we had virtual teams spread across the world, spread across the globe in China, Philippines, India, 3 or 4 centers in Europe, and then 2 or 3 centers in South America. And we were trying to get the teams to be more cohesive and trying to build out the maturity of the technology areas that we were operating in. And so through the centers of excellence, we actually had virtual leaders on each of the technology and business process topics that we identified as centers of excellence. And each of these leaders worked with their counterparts in the different geographies to ensure alignment on process, technology, and look at different ways to innovate, looking at the follow the sun model and multiple other process and technology related improvements. So as you can see, 3 very different and distinct governance models depending on what we were trying to achieve. And of course, the situation that you are in at that point in time. Now let's talk about culture. And I know this whole, I think the whole framework is relevant from a cultural perspective. But on the topic of culture itself, and the way I think of culture is individual culture, like I'm an individual with my own beliefs and values that translate into behaviors that form my own culture. And that's based on my experiences. But you also have an organization that is driving their own organizational culture based on their values and beliefs and their experiences and the behaviors that people exhibit. And then you have location specific or geographic specific cultures. But that's not just, I don't see it as 3 layers of culture. There are multiple layers of culture when you start thinking about culture as a topic itself. In this case, we're talking about the organizational cultures and how that could impact a large transformation. So when we were looking at this merger of moving a publicly listed company into a back office and merging it with delisting it and merging it with another back office setup. Interestingly, we had an excellent management of change consultant who had come and done a workshop for us. And she asked the participants to start thinking about attributes of the individuals based on a sports game. And what was very interesting, and you won't be surprised, is that the ones that were talking, the publicly listed company, the folks that were in the publicly listed company were described as American football or rugby players. They were go-getters, they were goal pushers, they had to work on a quarterly target, and of course the stress of being a publicly listed company. So that's how that's the sports analogy that was that they had. Whereas the back office location was very sophisticated. They were focused on research for the global conglomerate. They were more relaxed in terms of their deliverables. They did not have the quarterly deadlines or the stress that a publicly listed firm would have. They of course had other stressors, but they came across as polo players, extremely sophisticated. And I think the beauty of doing this workshop is, as long as you are aware and you understand the perspective that the person brings into the room when they're talking and working with you, I think that opens up a huge platform to be more empathetic and to be more appreciative of working with different folks from different cultures. And that's the same thing would go from a geographic perspective as well. Now, this is a very interesting and taps right into culture, but I'll talk about communication here. Now, everyone talks about communication, but I want to talk about getting communication right. So when I grew up in India, I'm actually holidaying where I grew up, my dad had a broken down Fiat that looked quite similar to this. In fact, I think we had to push it to make it move and start the engine, right? And I didn't really grow up driving myself around, but I did move to the US. And when I was in the US, I was based in the HP headquarters in Palo Alto. And I decided that I needed to know how to drive. And so while I had my learner's permit, I used to rent out cars and start driving around town just to get familiar with it. And one day while I was driving around, this happened. You see it on the right side. And I quickly got off the car and I was trying to, close it, and it just wouldn't close. So there were two young, I'm guessing Stanford graduates that were in a sports car, and they parked their car and they decided to help. So they were like, "Can I help you?" And I was like, "Yeah, my dicky won't shut." And they're looking at me and they're like, "Can I help you?" I said, "Yeah, my dicky won't shut." And they looked at me like I was this absolutely cuckoo crazy woman, up to no good. And they decided the best thing they could do is drive off, and they drove off. Now, just to give you a heads up, in India, where I grew up, the dicky is an enclosed compartment of a car for holding luggage, or what you call the boot, or what you call the trunk, depending on where you're based. I'm guessing maybe in this international audience, you do have a few folks, like the folks in Calcutta, that still call the car boot the dicky. Now, let's take this in the context of the corporate world. When we had actually set up a global operations, back office operations center based out of India, supporting our EMEA team. And everything was fine. We didn't have problems with quality, but yet there was discussion at the management layer about moving that team to East Europe. And the reason for doing that was they could not understand each other. And in this case, in the case of the car, I obviously did not give my requirements to those two young grads clearly. I did not articulate my requirements clearly. And they decided the best thing to do was to drive away. And similarly, in our situations, when we deal with corporates on a regular basis, I think the question we need to ask ourselves is, have we communicated our requirements clearly such that the receiver or the person on the other side has really understood, versus, looking at poor quality or, lack of communication? Because most of the time the question is, have I done my job in terms of communicating and clearly articulating my requirements such that the other person can understand? So I'll move on to the top big mistakes. Like I said, some of them I have learned and some of them I have recognized looking at different initiatives. One of the big mistakes, I believe, and this typically happens, I've seen this happening over and over again, is the one-man band. The one-man band concept is when you look at, you have a huge strategic initiative or a transformation, and you want to move folks from one place to the other, you typically hire your best people, or you'd get a huge consulting firm and pay them an enormous amount to actually start looking at how do we make the change and what needs to be done. And again, think of Mozart's symphony. We would not have had that beautiful music if each of those subject matter experts who knew how to play their instruments phenomenally well was not engaged. And therefore, when we think of a strategic initiative, it's important to get the right stakeholders in the room and actually engage the right workforce so that you're able to bring out the best, versus one or two or three people assuming and trying to do everything that they may not be subject matter experts on either. Another big mistake, which is interesting, and I see this again a lot, and in fact, a lot of folks come back and tell me as well, when we have a goal and a vision and we start laying out multiple work streams, they're like, hey, let's just focus on this. Let's get this right? And then we'll figure out the rest of it later. And I think women know how to multitask quite effectively, so I have to probably take that as an advantage. But the important part is when you start focusing on just a single topic to reach a much broader goal, you are not realizing the impact that you have on the other stakeholder groups or the other work streams that could potentially be impacted by this, by the choices that you're making. So that's another example of singular focus. Rewarding the wrong behavior, that's another very interesting one. And I've seen that, in fact, when I've seen that individually in my experience, but I also saw it when I was looking at the Bridges Consulting survey, that one of the biggest problems that were identified in terms of strategies failing was that, we were rewarding the wrong behaviors, or we didn't have the right metrics in place. And this is, I can give you, if we think of it as an example, when you're looking at, say, moving a workforce to a more cost-optimized location, let me give you another example. Let's talk about when we're looking at a T&M model or a staffing type of engagement. Typically, the workforce is focused on bringing more revenue in. So the more busy you are, the better the revenue. Now you come up with this fixed price model, and you decide that now you want to address your market and you want to drive your sales through a fixed price bid, which means that now you have to be much more efficient at doing what you are. You don't need to be busy. Your driver needs to be, how do you get much more productive and much more innovative to bring the costs down? A very different driver from what was initially, what was being done initially, and how you were being driven, and the behaviors were being driven earlier. So it is critical that organizations look at, when you are driving a strategic change, it's critical that you're also thinking of the metrics, the KPIs, the rewards and recognition, and how you are maneuvering your organization to change the behaviors based on the new metrics that you need to put in place. The last one is poor sponsorship. I have heard a lot of street bands over the, traveling across the globe. And I think some of them are fantastic. I have to say that, right? You can make beautiful music with 4 people. However, again, let's go back to Mozart's symphony. And let's just imagine that symphony in our ears, right? Ringing in our ears. If you do not have enough sponsorship, you give me pennies, this is what you get, right? If you don't have enough corporate sponsorship for your initiative, you can only do so much. And when I think of sponsorship, I don't think just of budget or monetary sponsorship. I'm thinking of sponsorship in terms of engagement of senior executives and engagement throughout and time that they give you for that initiative. Because a lot of folks might say, here's your budget, go do it, but may not be engaging on a regular basis and therefore might lose sight and might lose focus of what we're trying to do here. So I hope I didn't take too much, I didn't go too much over, but in the end, I love this quote. It says, it's not the strongest of species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but it's the one that's most responsive to change. And I think as the principal conductor, when you are taking your organization through that change, think of Mozart's symphony and how you can impact that change much more successfully. Thanks so much, Jose.
Outstanding, Niloofer. Listen, we are right on time when it comes to this session. So we have directed our audience to ask any follow-up questions to you directly on LinkedIn. So I'll ask you to now just stop showing your presentation screen to the audience, and so that they can see you on the big screen. Perfect. And thank you so much, Niloofer, for sharing your wisdom and expertise. I know you're traveling around the world right now and you had to stop and do all these arrangements to be here with us. It's a great testament to the journeys of cultural transformation that you have been on professionally and personally across many countries. So thank you. I know it's late in Chennai, India right now, and I appreciate you being here with us. And on behalf of our global audience, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and expertise with all of us.
Thank you so much, Josette, and always a pleasure to come back and speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Niloofer Darbari, directly from Chennai in India to the world here, discussing with us the cultural transformation at Fiserv and how it's being done around the world. And if you have specific questions, follow-up questions for Niloofer, please go onto the posting that on LinkedIn that I put on the chat. Click on that. You're gonna have all the speakers for today listed in there, including Niloofer, and you can contact her directly. And you can also post your question right there, or a commentary, thank you, whatever you want to do on that space. So we're gonna be taking a break now. I'm gonna close this session, and when we reopen at the top of the hour, we're gonna be bringing a leader of customer operations, who is engaged in cultural transformation at BCLC, and he'll tell you more about what BCLC does. It's a very interesting business, and this is Martin Lempman, and Martin will be talking about the key building blocks in building a successful, high-performing culture, not just transforming the culture, transforming a culture to be high performing and successful. So we're gonna learn from his practical insights at the top of the hour. So for now, I will be closing the session. See you back at the top of the hour.